Well, my friends, welcome back. Where are we here? Roughly about week 6. And, I've been watching my grass grow. We're in the 50s and what have you. And it kind of dawned on me that, I really haven't talked to you about your grass itself. I know most of it goes into the soils, and they are the number one key to the perfect lawn. Okay, and I'm not going to argue that in any way, shape, or form, because I've seen the soil make so much of a difference. But when you're looking at your grass, I pause here because it's how do I explain this, and not misrepresent it, because it is important. When to cut your grass, what you're looking for. Now, with me, it's about the stripes. It's all about the stripes. Because I want that presentation when I'm coming down the street, and it's a personal preference. It's got nothing to do with neighbors or anything else. When I come down the street and I see my lawn compared to everybody else's, and I've got those brilliant lines in there, that's it for me. That's my big reward. But when do you cut it? Well, you really don't want to cut it during germination. Okay, so your new grass, and that's why you test it so much as to when you cut it. You kind of want to cut it in between the vegetative and the elongation stage. You never ever want it to get to reproduction. Because that's when it starts to seed, and that's when it reaches adulthood or its maturity. There's a problem with that. When grass goes to maturity, it basically reaches old age and dies. Okay? Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to cut as often and don't want to be, and there's things you can do to slow things down there. You can use more potassium in your yard. You can use more phosphorus in your yard. And these two things are going to promote more so in your root and in the health of your yard. Okay, more potassium and phosphorus. These are the two key components when you're talking the NPK process. But you're sitting there looking at it and going, okay, well, but I don't want to be on the NPK process. I want to let it naturally do its thing. Well, that's what mulch is for. When you're mulching grass and using a mulching blade, when you're grinding up leaves and those kind of things, you're naturally putting that kind of stuff back in your soil. Again, we talk about what comes out of the soil isn't getting replenished and getting put back into the soil. And we'll go into that. But being, week 5, week 6, we want to start identifying and being able to just very briefly look at the grass, see that stalk. Okay, that's the best way to put it. Where the weed or the seeding would start to grow. Okay. obviously one of the first signs is bees start landing in the yard in the grass a lot. Well, that's because they're getting pollen and they're, doing their thing with the seeds and stuff. And that's instantaneous. We don't want this. Because if the grass dies off because it reached its maturity, then we're losing that whole plant. And depending on the type of plant, it could be an entire area, 4 foot, 5 foot square, that we're losing because we allowed that area to go into adulthood. And these people that don't want that much grass cutting and don't want, they're actually hurting themselves. If this is making any sense to you, because useful grass expands and expands and expands and expands. It goes crazy. It will grow tall, it will grow wide, and it will spread like wildfire. And just like you and I, when we start to reach maturity, we start to slow down a little bit, start to take things in a better stride, start to do things just a little bit differently. And I know a lot of people say, well, what I do is I let my grass go to seed. And then once all the seed falls, then I cut the grass. And then I let it do it again. Well, they're not getting seed penetration. So in essence, they're just putting a bunch of seeds out there that are going to end up in the neighbor's yard or somewhere else down the street or get washed away. They're not actually benefiting from it unless they've got some other trick. And I do. We'll discuss that. But, we talk about reseeding every year, every other year, or twice a season, depending on what you're attempting to do. Your yard, your choices. If you are on a hillside of some sort, you kind of want more grass there than you want anything else because you don't want the erosion. Something's got to be there to hold that soil there. If you're in nothing but a flat area, you're fighting, puddling and pooling and what have you. If you're in a rough terrain area, you want the rough terrain to go away and things to come back up. And so it's all in your choices. Okay. What you don't want is your grass reaching maturity. That's when everything starts to go a little funky. That's when things start to show up and problems start to arise. And that's when weeds come in. And that's kind of the point. If we keep nothing but the youth and the youthful grass growing, we've got so much pressure on the yard and so much pressure on the soil that weed seed can't really get going. Now we're at week 6. So we can start thinking about a potential overseed because you just seeded that one area and it's got a more brilliant color, if I can say it that way, than the rest of your yard. And you kind of want to bring the rest of the yard up to speed, right? But you don't want to dig anything up. Well, this is where aeration comes in. Now, hold on. I know a lot of you are going to sit back and go, wait, I got to get a plug aerator? No. Throughout my book, I talk about different ways of aeration, different ways of getting the seed into your soil without you having to dig anything up. Now, on my tractor, I have a tow behind, and it's a slice aerator. You just drag this thing behind you, and it weighs enough that the stars that are on this thing slice into the soil. Okay, that's not excess sunlight, that's not excess air, that's not excess water. It's just a little slice, maybe an inch inch and a half into the ground. Okay. And I drag this thing all over the yard, and I try and keep it off the cement, but that's inevitably you're going to hit cement, and then it sounds ridiculous, and you worry about it falling apart, ripping itself apart, and what have you. And I know if you get your hands on one the very first time you use it, you're not going to see this thing sink into the ground very well. And there's tricks to it. You can do it slightly after, a day after it rains, or the morning after it rains, or I put it excess weight on mine. Like I'm carrying bricks. Okay. You don't need to go that far. You really don't. You can get on Amazon, and I know I should have links on all of this stuff and what have you, but you can get on Amazon and you can get spike shoes. Both. Well, they used to make an old golf shoe with steel spikes, and you could change the size of the spikes. Some of you golfers will know about this. You may still be able to find them. I'm not 100% certain, but they've come out with some other ones that will either tie on over top of your shoes, what have you. The whole point of the thing here is we want to be putting more holes in the topsoil, right there at the top, inch or two into the ground. And I would even recommend in some situations, especially where you guys are dealing with a little bit of water and you've been putting the salt down and you want to help it get in there, you may want to go down there with your golf shoes on or something and get down in there. Now, aeration, to call someone in and come in with a plug aerator, it has its benefits, but it's got its drawbacks too. Okay. I don't know to say that it is detrimental to the entire lawn. I have seen it do both, be detrimental and in other situations be absolutely incredible and life-saving to the yard. The point is, once you have these holes, we need to get stuff in there. And if you've read through the book, you know what kind of stuff I'm talking about. But we're at week 6, and we don't necessarily have problems from the neighbors yet. So we want to get more seed down throughout the entire yard. Not enough to wash it away, but enough to get 2 or 3, 4 seeds, 6 seeds in each one of these little holes. I had a situation in a client's yard where for years they had not been able to get the front yard to grow. And I caught it at just the right time, not knowing that they were going on vacation. And in essence, I snuck into their yard and I aerated that area, that whole front section of their front yard. I didn't go in the back. I didn't go alongside, just the front. And then I went over there with a 50-50 shade and sun mix and got those seeds down in those holes. And it took a little bit. All right. They had gone on vacation, so the watering wasn't taking place and this, that, whatever. But the end result was I had opened everything back up. The salt had begun to absorb in and open up their soils, making it easier for the seed to grow. And the seed took off, and they now have a beautiful front yard. And of course, I had situations where I dealt with a thing called an army worm that had just devastated people's yards. These things go to work and they do huge amounts of devastation overnight. Hundreds of feet of grass dead overnight. These critters are something else. Hadn't seen them before in Ohio, but and I was able to restore those lawns relatively quickly, uh, and it came back in gangbuster style because of aeration. So plug aeration, I am not deterring. I am not saying it's bad. But for the purposes that we're looking at, we want to be doing the least amount of work, the least amount of labor, right? And getting the most of results, the most out of our results. So we kind of want to be, every time we go cut grass, let's put them spikes on. You know, start thinking along those lines so that the more holes we have throughout the yard, okay, because you think about that every other week or every week, you're out there walking around behind a mower and you're punching little holes. I don't, you know, and you may only start at a half inch. You may not sink very deep because the soil's not really opening up yet. What I'm going to suggest here is, with your choice of seed, you go to don't follow the measurements on the bag. First and foremost, I don't necessarily think, when they're talking about their overseeding and their measurements for overseeding, I don't necessarily think they're thinking about a pre-existing lawn with clay, with puddles, with this, with that. These manufacturers are looking at these pristinely prepped, you know, nothing but topsoil for 5 feet, just brought in from God only knows where, dumping the NPK process on it, and then they overseed it, and then they water it every single day, and talk about overkill. And I think that's where they're getting their measurements from. We want to use about half that measurement, and we want to mix our Epsom salt in with the seed. Okay? So we're not putting down a full blast of seed. We're just Epsom salt seed, Epsom salt seed, Epsom salt seed, kind of offset. Mix that seed up really good in your drop spreader or your broadcast spreader. It'll work in either one. Just, if you're going to use broadcast, please pay attention to where the wind is blowing, because you may end up seeding your entire driveway and miss your whole yard. It just depends on how windy it is that day. You understand my meaning. Because grass seed is really, really, really light by comparison to Epsom salt. So yeah, punching holes. Now see, I don't necessarily need to do that. I do it as overkill. I don't need to do it. I can go out on my lawn at any time throughout the grow season, and that's 50 plus. And I'll find worm sign all over the place. I don't have the grubs. I don't have the other issues and the molds and the what have yous, because I use other tricks. I use other things that deter them and drive them away. So I have these natural holes already. And with the grass already established, I already have the microbial life that is required for that particular type of grass seed. So I'm just expanding the root base throughout by adding more seed on a continual basis. So if you're following along with me here, it's identifying your grass. Identifying at what stage is your grass. Now, some grasses are going to go to seed earlier, like your rye. They're going to go to seed earlier than, say, your bluegrass. Okay? So depending on your type of grass also dictates when you need to be cutting more often or less often. So all of that comes into play. You know, your When you start getting into the reproductive stage, when the bees are starting to land, that's when you need to be cutting. That's your last day. You need to knock that stuff down now and cause it to go more root growth and recover. And don't get sold on this idea that, oh well, we can only cut off a half inch at a time. So if I let my grass grow to 5 inches and I want a 3-inch grass, I'm going to have to cut today, and then a day later or tomorrow I'm going to have to cut again, and then no. Sharp blade, no problem. Don't worry about it. You're training your grass to be the length of cut. The more that you train it, the better it gets. And it's going to understand. And then, of course, when you go into your change of seasons, then grass does this, or grass does that, or grass does whatever. The more drought resistant your grass, and then there's so much involved here. My suggestion at this point, as you're identifying your grass and getting ready to add more seed throughout, like I said, cut back on what their recommendation is for your particular type of spreader. They always say water it in. Well, absolutely, especially if you're punching holes, because I, for one, am not going out there with a pair of tweezers and putting 3 or 4 little grass seeds in every single hole that I punched in my yard. That's not going to happen. I am not that particular. I'm sorry. You might be. More power to you. Oh my God, what a beautiful lawn you're going to have. But that's just not my thing. I'm sorry. I go fire up my barbecue and spend my time there instead. But we're going to have to water. And no, we're not talking about we're going to have to water as much as we did the brand new seeded area, where we had to turn things over and we had exposed soil and we had to cover it, and we had no. We need to get the sugar water down. We need to wash that seed into them holes. One of the things you might think about doing in the book is washing your yard that day. Because not only can you wash, and I'll discuss that in another video or another podcast, not only can you wash, remember I said all these things can go together. You can wash and you can sweeten at the same time. Okay? So let's look in that direction. Let's look in that area. I'm not saying overseed. That might be the measurement on the bag. But again, don't go by that measurement. And mix in Epsom salt. A couple of cups of and kind of, you want more seed than you have Epsom salt, but you want to mix it really, really well. So not quite a 50-50 mix, okay? And get your watering sweetener together for after the fact, because you want to wash that into them holes and get it out there. Now, like I said, there's a couple of different ways to aerate. In my yard, like I said, I do it as overkill. The worms do all my aeration. I don't need to worry about it. There is nail aeration that you can push around that just punches a little hole. There's so many ways. But rent it, because as your worms come in and as things start to change, lots of things are going to change. And aeration will no longer be one of those things you have to think about doing. Okay? So pay attention to what we've got going on here And let's get that yard going. Let's start looking for some of those identifying problems. We're going to get a little more in depth here and start headed into some of these other things in the book. So if you don't have your copy yet, might be your time to order it. Because as we start getting a little more in depth, I'm going to refer to things that might not make any sense. And the book is going to give you the backup information for it. So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your time. Let's go green. And let's change the whole planet, in my opinion, 1 yard at a time, starting with yours. Have a great day.